Elizabeth, accept this ring.
Most people say they want happy, healthy families. The reality is that we're not succeeding. We're marrying less. We break up more. If we have kids, we're having fewer of them and much later. Couples with children make up just 47% of all households, compared to 54% just a decade ago. In this glorious, wealthy country that is the West at its best, why don't we have more time to have and to hold, to laugh a little louder, and to let the moment last a little longer? What's struggling at the heart of this veneer of the good life? The family. Why is the family, this most fundamental building block of society, decaying so spectacularly in the West?
My name's Jocelyn. I live by myself in the inner city, Sydney, and I'm single.
As a 34-year-old arts administrator armed with a degree, Jocelyn is an example of Australia's fastest-growing household definition. A single person living alone with the increasingly common suspicion that life is dealing out a dud hand. A whole new world of choices undercut by a very modern malaise.
Judo classes, my God.
Yes, I've been to lots of weddings, particularly in the last few years. Everyone seems to be getting married. I'm usually friends of the bride, just because I have lots of female friends. I'm always on the table with the other singles, but there's always more single women than men. It's like, doesn't the groom have any single male friends? It just doesn't add up. I definitely think it was different for our parents, or for my parents. They got married when they were in their, 23, 24. And even that was quite old, And they both met through work. I definitely think in a previous generation I would have just got married by now. Having spoken to my mother about these things, I think she thinks that our generation wants too much.
I got married when I was young. Just met the right man, thought I'd snap him up while he came by. We had 3 gorgeous, gorgeous children and lived a fairly idyllic life, really. All up, we were together for 22 years, and I'd say, in all honesty, the first 14 or 15 of those years were fairly happy. Just enjoyed a good solid family time.
After a long day at her practice in Sydney's North Shore and lecturing in medicine, Dr. Lyndall Trevenna returns home. She scored the dream family life early and was poised to live happily ever after.
I don't know what happened around the 15-year mark, and I still don't know. And I think my ex-husband probably wouldn't be able to tell you what happened either. But my guess is that there was a gradual trend towards being seduced by materialism, by the job, and a culture in the corporate world which seemed to indicate that, drinks after work and extramarital relationships were fine and everybody did it, so you can have it too. And unfortunately, the repercussions of that were just far too great.
We may be spirits in a material world, but we still like to share our consumption with someone close. And they don't come any closer than family. Love 'em or hate 'em, family is all we've got.
Honey chicken or satay chicken?
Honey chicken.
The reality is that, research is showing that we do better when we are in partnerships or in satisfying relationships, at least, of some kind. And that as humans we seem to have a need to feel connected to and a sense of belonging with others.
When I grew up in Asia, family was, and still is, what life is all about. You lived your life in the familiar company of stern fathers, cuddly aunts, sweaty children, and most of all, loud mothers. Everyone stayed together, for better or for worse, because divorce was not an option. But the Western world is awash in options, especially for women who face new and complex choices in this consumption-driven, post-feminist era. It's no one's fault, but it's affecting all of us.
Split it up.
We live in such disposable times that we seem to bring this into our relationships as well, and our sense of what love should be, that if it doesn't work, chuck it. If it doesn't fit all the criteria, we're very prescriptive about what we want. And when it doesn't work, we chuck it, we get a new one. We're into high turnover, high volume, competition. All of that, feeds a very narcissistic kind of environment in which we're trying to find love. A very confusing one too, I think.
We just want a lot more. It has to be the absolute bells and whistles or it's not worth doing, I think. If I wanted to meet someone through work, I've chosen the wrong industry, definitely. When I was younger, it was through uni and everyone was single, everyone was in the same situation, And that I think now, as I say, because more and more people get coupled off, it's harder to meet people.
We're forced to live such fast, individual lives today that falling in love is in jeopardy, let alone the economic vagaries of having kids. Australians now work more hours than anyone else in the Western world to keep up our addiction to affluence. But love takes time and compromise, two luxuries we can't afford these days. Since the 60s social revolutions, we've cut loose a couple of generations without emotional support or advice in the name of freedom. So, no more village matchmaker to help find Mr. Right. You're on your own on the net or speed dating. 7 minutes to size up a partner. Forget the office romance or the boozy bar scene. This is where your already fragile instincts are really put to the test.
The majority of our database are women between the age of 30 to 32. They hit 30 and they say, something's got to change. I've been working my butt off. I am now an executive, I'm now a manager, or even, I'm owning my own business or whatever. Career's under control, but now I need a man.
More singles, more money, more disconnection. We live and work not in a community that cares and shares anymore, but in an economy that adds and subtracts. Our workplaces are increasingly casualised and short-term, which means less income stability, less commitment all round. We're lectured daily that our Rolls-Royce Western economy needs a more flexible workforce to keep us competitive. Unfortunately, that flexibility now infects our personal relationships.
Liquid love worries me. Liquid love is what we flow along and dip into and dip out of, but we don't want it to consolidate. We don't want the love to become solid because it will then ground us and possibly trap us. It's like the semi-detached couple. You're kind of in a relationship when it suits you, but kind of not when it doesn't.
We aspire to the liquid lives of today's heroes, celebrities, who represent everything but old realities like getting married and staying married. even new realities are struggling to stay true. After 30 years, feminism has delivered a fair go for women, but has feminism failed the family?
One of the great things of second wave feminism was to get women into the workforce in big numbers, but it hasn't given us the structures or the templates with which to know how to balance a work life with family life, how to invest a good 10 or 15 years of ourselves in our career and our education, and then how do we put that on hold and have a family and not lose our foothold in the workplace? Or how do we have a family or have a child and return to the workplace and still be taken seriously in a really patriarchal workplace, or the patriarchal workplaces of Australia? So they're the sorts of things that feminism hasn't provided for us. Now, we have to work that out, but the tragedy is we're not working it out very well. We're not even talking about it. And that's causing a great deal of frustration for women.
Frustration and also broken dreams. It's the "you can have it all" con that demands we be independent, financially and emotionally, or you're a failure.
I think the world always makes you think that there's going to be more and there's something better around the corner, and, you know, there's a constant thirst. And I think that was what my ex-husband found far too attractive, just not being content with what was there and not realising how rich a life he actually had on his own doorstep. You know, his kids, wife, his home, that the family was a treasure. What would you like, Em? I still call it a family because I think it is. I think we've just had to change shape substantially.
To maintain living standards, we now need 2 salaries to equal one 1966 salary. We need more money, so Dad and Mum have to work. And work in increasingly insecure short-term jobs that keep reformed economies happy, but not unreformed, wholesome family life.
People feel unable to keep up with the pace of life, unable to be both the kind of father or mother they want to be and the kind of worker they're being asked to be and want to be. And that's where I see the collision. And it's a collision which is increasingly affecting Australians, a growing number of them.
The result of which is leaving less women holding a baby.
Choice is a really interesting word when it comes to women. And let's face it, I mean, the biggest identity a woman will have eventually is as either mother or non-mother. So when women make a choice to be a mother, or in fact not to be a mother, and then perhaps down the track maybe even regret that, whatever choice we make, it will be thrown back at us as, oh well, you've made your choice. You have been able to feast from a smorgasbord of choices that have never been available to women of past generations. So you've made your choice, now you live with it. Now, that's where choice can actually be a little bit of a poisonous thing.
Why are we doing this to ourselves? Because we're spoilt for choice. We're desperate and clueless. What we have, we discard. Divorce, the soiled trophy of Western liberalism.
I think the pressures on husband and wife are a bit different in many ways than they were. I think one of the more significant differences was the increasing amount of time people had to spend apart from their children. I think that itself carried with it a degree of problem so far as the maintenance of a family was concerned. Of course, the other feature was that quite often there was a great increase in the number of children who were born outside wedlock, which is sometimes overlooked, but it's been very significant. And you then get the sort of family breakdown problems of serial fathers and one mother and that sort of thing, which we didn't encounter very much or as much, in the earlier stages.
But biology has a use-by date, and so do our emotions. Who's in charge here? Are there any rules left? Any discipline? This is life in the West today. We're just slaves on an economic treadmill that measures success not in terms of endearment, but in hard materialism. All we do is work all day and into the weekend, just to keep up with a bewildering market offering righteous self-indulgence now, over and above the family, the main reason for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Oh, say thank you.
The result of construing the self as kind of independent and separate from others, and the evidence suggests men tend to do this more than women, does mean that we're more likely to feel isolated and lonely, even in company, even in the bosom of the family, you get this effect.
And now, sailing the uncharted waters of globalization, we're more mobile with our careers and therefore have less opportunity to establish a local network. When we do, we're less inclined to talk to the neighbours, which is a bit sad in this suburban culture. And saddest of all, we're taking our children down into this mire of meaninglessness.
I have never seen a more lost generation of kids. It's almost like the spark of God is lost within them. There's a hollow shell. They're always listening to their iPods. They don't even want to talk to their parents. They just want to be left alone in their rooms.
Basically, the message the kids get, parents' careers and all the lifestyle of affluence that money affords are really more important than they are, the children are. And, this actually then can lead to sort of directly to problems of feeling not loved, but one of the consequences that they in turn, feel that they have to achieve and keep achieving at a very high level in order to feel good about themselves and to earn their parents' love.
I think the corporate world's got a lot to answer for in terms of the demands they place on the times of a lot of men in this country. And, if you're only spending a short number of waking hours in each day with your family, but you're spending the rest in that sort of rather selfish culture, then that's what you become.
The stereotypical Australian father was stoic, silent and strong. They have softened to a point of confusion about their roles and worth. And, like the young single professional women and the middle-aged working mothers who look after the young and old,
Daddy's on the phone.
fathers are also victim to this Western cultural fraud, working longer and harder to earn more to pay for more, forcing us away again, physically and emotionally, from our families.
I work extremely long hours. Macquarie Bank, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. Every 24 hours of the day, you just don't know when you need to work, whether I've got to go on a conference call overseas at, 12 o'clock at night or, fly out on a plane at 6 in the morning or whatever it is. So it's really a matter of, I think as a minimum, you've got to be in a position where you can at least control those hours to an extent where you're not controlled by them.
Dan Phillips is a banking executive and father of 3 who's obsessive about prioritising his life.
3 things that are most important to me are my fitness, personal well-being, family and work. And taking care of any of those is a full-time job, let alone all 3. You've got to be realistic, about what you can achieve and what the goals are. But then once you've got the realism, and set realistic objectives, you've then just got to be, I think the word is obsessive about achieving them.
The Pathways Foundation, based in Queensland, was developed by men interested and concerned about the health and well-being of boys and young men in Australia. In an era of time is money, Pathways encourages fathers to unplug and get away from their high-powered offices to reconnect with their sons.
Oh no, we have to get that hoop-like shit.
What does it say?
We have to get one of the hoop things. Yeah.
Goes across the front, I think.
Okay.
What we're finding is that so many men are overwhelmed by the responsibilities of work, and that when they're not working with mobile phones and other commitments, what tends to happen is they get very little time with their families. So the main thrust of our program is around encouraging men to look to find that balance where family is important, family is a priority, but they can also provide for them and have a job and have a career.
That's it. And you can hang on to Nigel's head if you like.
Trouble is, we may all have to become merchant bankers to pay for our accumulating lifestyles. When did we allow play to become so structured and artificial, so removed from home?
I would hope that in 5 years, certainly in 10 years, the demands will be different. And, I mean, life is always in reverse, isn't it? If you could have your mortgage when you're late in life, when you don't have all those other pressures, well, that would be perfect. Just like if, you know, when you've got all the time to spend with the kids, well, that's when you don't have your career anymore. But unfortunately, they're not kids anymore.
And we risk losing the only love that matters. Playwright and Nobel laureate George Bernard Shaw was asked towards the end of his illustrious life what he thought was his greatest achievement. He replied, "I still have children that talk to me." Soon, not many of us will be able to say the same.
Wasn't childhood and youthfulness about precociousness? Wasn't it about, being so full of life and you had to be controlled? Now, they all look like, so many teenagers look like corpses today. There's just no life in them. And the only time they come to life is when it comes to rowdy behavior. If they want to binge drink, they suddenly come to life. But in class and school, the curiosity is lost. They don't even want to know anything. It's not just that they're ignorant. It's not just that they don't read books. It's that they're not curious. They have no desire to lift the hood and see what engine is underneath there that makes it all tick.
We don't have the time, the money, the support, the traditions, or the family anymore to have and share kids that will talk to us at day's dawn or life's twilight. And this is supposed to be the West at its best.
The advantages of being single. You can make decisions completely only considering yourself. So I suppose an advantage is you can be as selfish as you want to all the time. The flip side is, not having someone to be close to all the time. Not knowing whether you're going to have kids.
Loving somebody requires you to trust them and make yourself vulnerable, and you won't really experience the joy of love unless you do that. That's real life.
In this increasingly lonely and selfish world we're deconstructing for ourselves, is there another way to find meaning other than going backwards?
Well, if we can increase hope generally in society, people will have children. The economic pressures on young couples, and not necessarily because they're simply because they're greedy or over-ambitious, but if those financial pressures are so strong on them that it's very, very difficult to have children, then I think it's at that stage that government and businesses should look together to see what can be done. Because, it's very simple. There's no children, there's no future.
Ear of the good life? The family. Why is the family, this most fundamental building block of society, decaying so spectacularly in the West.
My name's Jocelyn. I live by myself in the inner city, Sydney, and I'm single.
As a 34-year-old arts administrator armed with a degree, Jocelyn is an example of Australia's fastest-growing household definition. A single person living alone with the increasingly common suspicion that life is dealing out a dud hand. A whole new world of choices undercut by a very modern malaise.
Elizabeth, accept this ring.
Most people say they want happy, healthy families. The reality is that we're not succeeding. We're marrying less. We break up more. If we have kids, we're having fewer of them and much later. Couples with children make up just 47% of all households, compared to 54% just a decade ago. In this glorious, wealthy country that is the West at its best, why don't we have more time to have and to hold? To laugh a little louder, and to let the moment last a little longer. What's struggling at the heart of this
Got married by now. Having spoken to my mother about these things, I think she thinks that our generation wants too much.
I got married when I was young. Just met the right man, thought I'd snap him up while he came by. We had 3 gorgeous, gorgeous children and lived a fairly idyllic life, really. All up, we were together for 22 years, and I'd say, in all honesty, the first 14 or 15 of those years were fairly happy. Just enjoyed a good solid family time.
Judo classes, my God.
Yes, I've been to lots of weddings, particularly in the last few years. Everyone seems to be getting married. I'm usually friends of the bride, just because I have lots of female friends. I'm always on the table with the other singles, but there's always more single women than men. It's like, doesn't the groom have any single male friends? It just doesn't add up. I definitely think it was different for our parents, or for my parents. They got married when they were in their 23, 24, and even that was quite old, And they both met through work. I definitely think in a previous generation I would have just...
After a long day at her practice in Sydney's North Shore and lecturing in medicine, Dr. Lyndall Trevenna returns home. She scored the dream family life early and was poised to live happily ever after.
I don't know what happened around the 15-year mark, and I still don't know. And I think my ex-husband probably wouldn't be able to tell you what happened either. But my guess is that there was a gradual trend towards being seduced by materialism, by the job, and a culture in the corporate world which seemed to indicate that, drinks after work and extramarital relationships were fine and everybody did it, so you can have it too. And